Well, howdy friends, Brian Flechsig of Mad River Outfitters in the Midwest Fly Fishing Schools, and welcome back to another one of our Q&A videos. As always friends, we appreciate all the questions. Be sure that you send them over to admin@madriveroutfitters.com, our only email address, and we will either get back to you there or we'll get back to you there and get you featured in a Q&A video here on YouTube. And of course, if we do feature you here on the channel, we're gonna send you out a free hat and a fly box. Be sure that to remember that we can't get to questions on social media or the comments on YouTube. It's just impossible, but you send them to me email, and that's something that we monitor all the time. And as always, we appreciate you being here. Be sure to subscribe, hit the like button, and all those fun things. So I'm gonna try to plow through quite a few. I think we've got 5 questions today, some fairly simple ones, and I think we should move pretty quickly. We're gonna start off with Bruce Haley. Bruce is coming at us from Lincoln, Nebraska. And Bruce says, good morning, MRO. I was watching a couple of leader videos of Brian's, and he mentions using a sink tip line for streamers. But I see the shop has both Rio and Scientific Anglers sinking leaders. What is the purpose of a sinking leader, and where would you use one? Can you build a sinking leader, and if so, what would you use? I learned something from every video MRO produces. Please keep them coming. Thanks for your help, Bruce. Well, Bruce, to answer your question, yes, I almost always fish a sink tip line for streamers. I love to fish unweighted flies, as you know. Of course, the Swimmin' Jimmy, the bangtail, the belly bumpers. So I'm almost always fishing a sink tip line for streamers. Occasionally, I'll throw a floating fly line with a weighted streamer like a Dungeon or a Boogeyman. But you can throw those on sink tips as well. So if I'm streamer fishing for trout, bass, peacock bass, a variety, all the other different things that we fish for, pike, muskie, it's almost always on a sink tip fly line. But we do, yes, you're right, we do sell these sinking leaders, such as the Rio Versi leaders. Scientific Anglers has their sonar leaders. And a sinking leader is literally a butt section, and it is tapered. It's a tapered butt section. It does have a loop in the one end, so you can loop it onto the tip of your fly line if you desire, and then it's tapered down to a thinner portion, and then it has a connector here, a monofilament connector, and that even has a loop in the end of it. So you could theoretically go loop to loop to your tippet section. I forget what this is, this monofilament connector. I think it's 0x. It might be 12 thousandths. You can look on our website. Our website tells you all the details about the diameters of butt sections and the diameters of this, because that's so important. Remember that pound test has nothing to do with fly fishing. It's all about stiffness and diameter. So anyways, you can just loop on a 1 to 2 foot section of tippet off of this, and you have a sinking leader. Now, this does not at all remotely replace a sink tip fly line. It just flat out doesn't. A lot of people, a lot of shops will try to tell you that, oh, just get a sinking leader, it's the same thing. It is absolutely not the same thing. I would use this if I was throwing small little streamers, old-fashioned stuff, maybe woolly buggers, muddler minnows, black-nosed dace, traditional single hook, size 8, maybe 10 streamers. I might consider using this type of leader, but I don't typically throw streamers like that. I throw Kelly Gallup, Blaine Chocolate style 6 to 8 inch articulated flies, and there is no way that this butt section is going to be able to turn over one of those large flies. Not to mention, I have to use tippet that's sometimes 12 thousandths, 13 thousandths, and that's going to be thicker than this connector. So I can't put a 12 thousandths tippet on here because this connector piece is thinner. And you can't ever ask a skinny kid to push a fat kid. it's going to create a hinge, and it's going to be a casting nightmare. So you'd have a horrible problem here in casting, and you're going to have a horrible problem here because this is not nearly stiff enough to throw a large streamer. And of course, I would never use this for nymph fishing. Nymph fishing is always going to be best done with a floating fly line and a long leader and an indicator, and or of course these days Euro style. So these are kind of cool. I mean, the number one application that I see for these is bluegill fishing. Throwing bluegill flies, maybe even real small streamers for bass, but throwing subsurface bluegill flies, I'll give you that. I think that's the primary reason for these Versi leaders. To be honest with you, they call them trout Versi leaders. Like I said, I don't bother fishing small streamers for trout much unless I'm fishing real shallow, clear water, or I'm fishing a small little brook trout stream or something. So this is not something you'll see me using very often. We do sell a ton of them. Obviously, somebody does. I don't think that you can build a sinking leader. I don't see how you would do that. They do sell level sinking line. It's basically the same stuff in level 1 sink rate, but the problem there is it's going to be all one diameter, and it's not going to cast very well. You're attaching a really heavy level piece of sinking line to the front of a weight forward fly line, and that's just not going to cast very well at all. So no, I would not recommend trying to build one. If you do want to fish small streamers or you're bluegill fishing, these Versi leaders are pretty cool, but it's never going to replace my sink tip fly line. So there you go, Bruce. Appreciate it. We will get you out the hat and the fly box. And next up, we have Mark Webb from Whitesboro, New York. And Mark says, Brian, thank you for the YouTube channel. I really enjoy your Q&A, and I learn something every time. This is one issue that stumps me, though. I've collected some woolly buggers in a variety of colors, mostly from your shop. I'm not sure which colors, thank you for that, Mark. I'm not sure which colors I should use in which situation. I understand the basic concept of dark day, dark color, bright day, bright color, but what about other colors? I commonly see buggers in black, brown, olive, purple, yellow, orange, white, as well as other colors. What water conditions support different bugger colors the best? I really enjoy streamer fishing, feel that woolly buggers are a great first fly to use when exploring a new body of water. Any advice you can provide would be greatly appreciated, Mark. Well, Mark, it's a good question. And, there is some truth. I think we all learned from the bass fishing world, dark day, dark color, bright day, bright color. There's probably some truth to that. But I would say, I don't know. You're going to have to experiment and play around and find number one, what works best in your waters. But then I'll also tell you that my philosophy is what I learned from Kelly Gallup. And Kelly taught us this in, of course, Modern Streamers for Trophy Trout, which I heard recently this was referred to as the book. In the 90s, there was the movie, A River Runs Through It, of course, and then there was the book that changed our lives, it changed our industry, and created a whole segment of our industry. And then, of course, Modern Streamers for Trophy Trout 2, two of the most influential books of all time. But Kelly's philosophy is this. He doesn't know, the conditions might not know, but it's up to the fish and what kind of mood they're in on that given day. Kelly will, I've heard him say, and I believe it's in the books as well, he's going to start off with a drab color. Let's say he's going to start off with black. And if black doesn't work, he's going to switch to something really bright color. And then he's going to switch back to neutral color, say olive or tan. Then he's going to go to chartreuse. Then he's going to go to a white. Then he's going to go to purple. So you're really alternating between neutral colors, drab colors, and maybe even bright colors until you figure out what the fish are looking for. I have fished before with Kelly, and I'm telling you, within 15 minutes, the guy has maybe gone through 6 or 8 fly colors. And it's not so much the pattern necessarily. I think Kelly, like myself, has his favorite streamer patterns, but he will absolutely plow through in a very short period of time a bunch of different colors. I've seen him make 2 or 3 passes through a run, and if that color doesn't do it, he tries to get them dialed in. And they say, well, we got them dialed in on, they were on yellow until about 10 a.m. and then they switched to black. So, and it was very interesting. I've been reading a lot of Theodore Gordon, the father of modern dry fly fishing in the United States, a legendary fly angling figure. And I noticed that Theodore Gordon had a similar approach to dry fly fishing. And although we've often learned that the color doesn't matter all that much, he seemed to disagree, and he was all about color. And he would start off with a yellow body, and if that didn't work, he would go to a dun colored body. If that didn't work, he would go white. If that didn't work, he would go olive. So kind of the same philosophy. In fact, when I was reading recently on Theodore Gordon, I called Kelly Gallup and I said, hey man, did you ever study Theodore Gordon? Because there's a lot of similarities in things that you say and what he says. And he says, no, I really didn't, which was actually the answer I wanted to hear, because it led me to believe that those similar research and findings of 2 great legendary anglers of our time. So I think, you can't go wrong with black. You're absolutely right here. The woolly buggers are a great first fly to use, and if somebody's looking for a fly to get started with, get yourself a mess of woolly buggers, but make sure you have black. I would say make sure you have olive, make sure you have white, and make sure you have chartreuse. As you know, it ain't no use if it ain't chartreuse. So, and maybe you keep that simple and start with black, then go to white. If that doesn't work, go to olive. If that doesn't work, go to chartreuse, or go to yellow. Yellow is another great color that Kelly talks a lot about in modern streamers for trophy trout. And my streamer boxes always got yellow streamers in it, and it can really save the day. So, Mark, I'm not sure I exactly answered your question perfectly, but I would say you're going to have to experiment around. And, dirty water, I'm going to typically start with black. Clear water, I'll probably start with black. And then you just keep playing around until you find what the fish are looking for on that particular day. I think it not so much has to do with the conditions necessarily, but more what kind of mood are the fish in. So there you have it. I hope that helps a little bit. All right, next up, James McCoskey. James McCoskey does not tell us where he's from, so if you're out there, James, send us your address and we'll send you the hat and a fly box. Dear fish speakers, I like that, a fish speaker. I started fly fishing since age of 13 and I was self-taught. Not a single person I knew did this style of fishing. Broke a number of poles along their way, but never got discouraged. Awesome. Anyways, recently I finally went fishing after 12 years away, which revived this old passion. This also led me to your YouTube channel, and very informative, which I found out myself taught skill has millions of holes. One thing I never understood was the tippets and how to use them. I've tried to use them a few times and gave up. I knew I was missing something as I used up a ton of leaders over the season. Are there times that I should not use a tippet versus using one, and how much tippets should be used? Is this based off of what kind of a fly, dry versus streamer, or does it matter? Thank you, James McCoskey. James, I think we should review a little bit, and I did pick this question because a lot of people still have a lot of misconceptions about leader and tippet, and hopefully I can explain this to you and clear it up a little bit. I want you to remember that the word leader, okay, the word leader equals a tapered butt section plus a tippet. If you buy a leader off the wall in a fly shop and it says leader, inside the package is a tapered butt section, and a tippet all in one. You don't really need to do anything. In most cases, you do not need to add, nor do you want to add tippet to this. It already has tippet, unless you have a very specific application, like you're fishing a dry fly on very flat water and you want a longer tippet. You don't need to add tippet to this. Now, once I start to cut this leader back, okay, so I've got the tapered butt section, and the tippet, by definition, is the last diameter. In almost every situation, except when you have a bite tippet on here for like pike or muskie or tarpon, the tippet is the last diameter of the leader. So once you start cutting that leader back, let's say it's a 9-foot leader, which is going to be by far the most popular length. Number one selling leader on the market is 9 foot. So you're going to have approximately 7 foot of tapered butt section, and this is approximately 2 foot of tippet, making a 9-foot leader. Once you start to cut that back, you tie on a fly, you get one fly caught in a tree, you get another fly caught in a tree, and now your leader is, say, 7.5 foot long. You're going to simply tie on a piece of tippet. You're going to have a corresponding, this was a 2X leader, for example. You're going to have some 2X tippet. You're going to tie on about 1.5 feet of 2X, make that approximately 2 foot again, and now your leader is whole, okay? So it's really pretty simple, and I think you mentioned here that you were wasting a bunch of money, you used up a ton of leaders over the season, and if you just simply cut it back until it's too fat to fit through the eye of the fly anymore, first of all, you're not matched up properly, and yes, you are wasting the heck out of leaders. Your other question, are there times I should not use a tippet? You really can't not use a tippet. Okay, tippet is the final diameter of the leader. Now, you may not have the proper length of tippet, but it's really hard to not use a tippet. I mean, even if this leader were now 5 foot long, by definition, the tippet is still the last diameter there. The tippet is to where you tie the fly on. So I think we're kind of playing semantics there a little bit, but yeah, you really need to have a tippet. And like I said, you almost can't not have a tippet because it's just the last diameter of the leader to where you tie on the fly. You might not have that right, and if you're not adding tippet as you go, I can virtually guarantee that it's not right, but you still kind of have a tippet. And then your final question is how much tippet should be used. And that's going to vary from situation to situation. I would say in streamer fishing, for example, when I'm building a leader off of a sink tip fly line, I usually go with about 1 foot of tippet. In general, you know, as I stated here, as a general statement, your tippet should usually be somewhere around 2 foot in length on average. Okay, it might be 18 inches, it might be 26 inches, but somewhere around 2 foot of your leader should be tippet. And in some cases, for non-contact fly fishing, non-contact where you want the fly to drift naturally with the current, that's going to be nymph fishing or dry fly fishing, you may want to have an even longer tippet. You may go up to 4 foot of tippet to where you would add another 2 foot even to a store-bought package leader. So you've got 4 foot of tippet on the front. That's going to allow for a more non-contact or natural drift of a dry fly or a nymph. But in general, you know, also the heavier the fly, if you're trying to cast a really big, fat, heavy fly, a shorter tippet is going to be easier to turn over than a long tippet, okay? You know what, I forgot to mention, in the first question about these sinking leaders, I get a lot of people, both here in the shop and that send me emails and call me here at the shop, and they buy these sinking leaders and they attach on 4 to 5 foot of tippet. Okay, and that's just, I would never do more than a foot, maybe 2 foot of tippet off this. If you think about that, your sinking leader is going to be sinking, and then you've got 4 foot of tippet, so your fly is going to be up here. As a general rule in fishing, you always keep the weight source as close to the bait as you can without having split shot right up against the head of a fly. But you always keep the weight source as close to the bait as you can, and therefore your weight source is this. Same thing with a sink tip fly line. I usually go no more than 4 or 5 foot. A lot of people buy a sinking tip fly line and then they attach a store-bought 9-foot leader to that. The fly line is sinking here and your fly's riding way up here. So sorry, I forgot to mention that. That goes back to the first question of the day. So James, I hope that answers your question there. Yes, tippet is a part of the leader. It would be hard to not have a tippet on there. You can not have the right length of it. And again, streamers, keep it short. Dry flies and nymphs, you can go 2 to 4 foot, maybe sometimes longer in extreme conditions. Also, heavier flies are going to be easier cast on a shorter tippet. So I hope that helps and makes sense. And again, James, send us your address if you happen to see this, and we'll be happy to send you out that hat and fly box. And let's see, I've got but 2 more quick ones, I promise. Hi, Brian. Love all your videos. Keep up the good work. You have a special skill at explaining things. Well, Ron Landry from Lexington, North Carolina, we really appreciate that. Appreciate you being here. I am new to fly fishing, and I've been practicing casting in my backyard. I do see some small improvements, but I still have a long way to go. Keep practicing. My question is, when I practice, I don't use a leader on my fly line. Should I be using one? Ron, absolutely. You have to have a leader on there. Otherwise, you've got energy coming off the fat pipe of your fly line, and it's got nowhere to go. It's going to flop all over the place. It's going to bounce and kick, and it's just going to be, that's going to be like riding a bucking bronco. You have got to have a leader, tapered leader on there in order for the energy to have somewhere to go. Okay? You have to let that energy flow smoothly from the tip of your fly line into the butt section of the leader, and then energy has to be bled off or dissipated as it travels down the leader. So in order to really effectively practice casting, you absolutely must have a leader on there. I don't necessarily want you to have a fly on there. That's not a big deal. If you want to tie on a little tuft of yarn, that can be helpful in seeing how it straightens out. And I'm not overly concerned about the size of the leader. You can use any leader as a practice leader. In fact, the leaders that come with the entry-level kits these days, they don't really tell us what they are, so they make good practice leaders. And then, of course, when it comes time to fish, you're going to put on a leader has the appropriate tippet matched up to the size of the fly that you're trying to cast. So, Ron, you absolutely, and I'm glad you sent that question. We get that question a lot. I'm sure that's going to help a lot of folks and a lot of beginners. So thanks for the question, and Ron will send you the hat and the fly box right down to Lexington, North Carolina. And last but not least, Ed Elms from Mercer Island, Washington. Ed says, aloha, MRO. Well, that's refreshing. Aloha right back to you, Ed. Thoroughly enjoy your channel. Well, thank you. My question is in reference to articulated streamers that have 2 hooks. Almost everywhere I fish, only one barbless hook is allowed on the fly, and I own several 2-hook streamers like the Sex Dungeon. If you have to cut off one hook, which hook should you cut off, the front or the back? Ed, that's a good question. We get that quite often, and we get that question on our Alaska trips, which we do every summer. Because the Naknek River where we fish is single hooks. So we do cut off one of the hooks, even though it pains me because I like articulated streamers and I like having 2 hooks on a fly. But you're always going to chop off the back hook. Okay? A lot of your streamers have eyes for a reason. Okay? And when a predator attacks a bait fish, when a predator attacks prey, he's going to hit it at the head, okay, for a couple of reasons. First of all, that's where he's going to do the most damage and potentially stun the fish, but that's also how he's going to eat it head first. They're never going to eat another fish tail first. So they almost always, there are a few exceptions, but almost always they go for the head, and therefore that front hook at the head of the fly is by far the most important. That next hook is just kind of back there as a security in case you get short strike, something like that. Just an added bonus. A lot of times you'll get both hooks for extra security. But absolutely hands down, no question, when you run into that scenario and you can only fish one hook on a fly, you're definitely going to cut the back hook off of that articulated streamer and leave the front hook, no question. So mahalo, Ed, I'm sorry if I pronounced that wrong, but as always, we appreciate your question, and we will send the hat and the fly box to Mercer Island, Washington, so be looking for that here shortly. So there you go, friends. I know that's a lot of talking, but as always, we appreciate your questions. Remember to send them over to admin@madriveroutfitters.com. That's where we will see them and get to them. We answer all questions, and of course, if it's an emergency and you need customer assistance, you pick up the shop, or you pick up the phone and call the shop. Customer service is what we do. Fly fishing is what we know and love. So we appreciate the support, friends. It's through your support that we can continue to make these videos. So go over to madriveroutfitters.com and hopefully place an order. And of course, let us know if we can help with that. So thanks as always. Stay tuned and stay in touch. If you like this video, hit subscribe. It helps out a lot. And check out these videos. We think you might like them too.